Every book has a moment before the page. A decision, a risk, a story worth telling. This is Authors After Action. Conversations with authors about the journey, the work, and the lessons learned along the way.
Welcome to Authors After Action with your host, Donald Dunn. The show where storytellers, thought leaders, and powerful voices share the missions behind their words. Today's guest is Amy Lou Jenkins, a writer whose journey is rooted in reclaiming the voice she was once told was too much, too direct, too emotional, too alive. After years of mistaking compliance for kindness and silence for respect, Amy found transformation in the quiet wisdom of the natural world while walking the woods with her son. There, she discovered a truth nature reflects effortlessly. Nothing apologizes for existing. By examining her life with honesty, she began unraveling the lies, secrets, and assumptions that had shaped her identity through suffering, poverty, abuse, and silence. What emerged was a voice that was never too much, only too contained. Today, Amy helps others reclaim their stories through journaling, memoir, nature-based reflection, and courageous conversation, reminding us that authentic storytelling is not self-indulgent. It is an act of alignment, courage, and belonging. Please welcome Amy Lou Jenkins.
Hey, how are you doing, Miss Amy? How's everything going?
I am wonderful. Thanks so much, Don, for having me on your show and for letting me tell my story.
Absolutely. You know, that's the amazing thing about podcasting. Maybe we got away from knowing who our neighbors are, but podcasting can bring that opportunity back for us all to still be able to learn from each other. So I love it.
Yes, wonderful. Glad to be here and glad to talk about my transformation from a nurse. Believe it or not, I was a nurse and then became a writer. So this is deep into my second career.
Absolutely. You know, and it's cool that you said, you know, into writing as your second career, because there's, you know, with that big boom of self-publishing has created, you know, where everybody is now out there writing books. There's a difference between being an author as a career and publishing books. You know, it used to be, holy cow, you published a book. That's amazing, you know, and that's still a great accomplishment. But now formatting and doing it at that level as career-wise is even more difficult, because there is a lot of stuff out there that probably would have never been there before without self-publishing. Yes.
And as you probably know, if you've picked them up, you know, that is a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because you know, having gatekeepers keeps the quality high, but it also selects voices and selects out voices who should be, you know, whose stories are important. So I kind of believe it's nice to publish both ways. It's nice to have control over some of your work, but it's also nice to get vetted and to be selected. And so I publish a lot of book reviews. I write book reviews for the Sierra Club. I've written for Consequence magazine, which is, you probably know about war and its aftermath. And for lots of magazines. And I also am a book judge for the Nonfiction Writers Association. So narrative nonfiction is really my jam. I love narrative nonfiction because I think it helps. I like all kinds of literature, but in terms of what I like to read, it's my favorite thing to read and to write, because we get these experiences that we live through. And some of them are really tough. Some of us have really been through a lot. And the best thing I think we can do is to try to make meaning out of those experiences. And then they have a wisdom of their own, so that our life and our wisdom has an identity outside of us that interacts with the reader. And really, we have a chance to nudge the world in a better direction.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I do believe there is room in this world for people that just want to write a book and tell their story. That I fall into that category. No way. I used to tell everybody when I published my first book, they'd ask me, well, where can I find it? And I would tell them it's going to be in every pharmacy right next to the melatonin, but I never did it for the purpose of caring about making money from it, or it never was a thought process to be a career. So I fell in that category where I did have a story and I did want to share it. And, it was just another way for me to do that. And I promise you, I've given away more books than I've ever sold. But I do believe that side of self-publishing is a great place for that. I don't want to see anybody silenced that has a story, and whether that's the same with podcasting. If everybody had to be Joe Rogan quality, the number of podcasts out there would be, I wouldn't be there. That's for sure. So I think it's important that we have that balance of, quality does matter, but you shouldn't have to have $10,000 to create one either.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that if we think that our story doesn't matter, what we need to do is think ahead a few generations. Yeah. I know, like I write, and my kids, read the books, especially if they're in them, then they'll read them, read them more. But, they don't think I'm all that much. Even I've won big awards and have had bestseller status. But, my writing career is, they don't see it much differently as when I was a nurse. That's right. That's what I do. But I recently, right before my mother died, she had a lot of questions about our family history. And so I did a lot of genealogy work. And you know what it would have meant if I could have come across a document from like a great-great-grandparent? You get a few generations down the road and we are strangers to them. And we are just a name. We have that birth date, that death date, and that little dash in between. And when you write a book, you become more than that dash. And, you come alive on the page. And also we have a lot of historic gatekeepers who tell the story of what our lives are and what our times were that may not always be accurate. So even if you feel like you're not going to publish work, getting it down it helps us make meaning of our life. And future generations are going to care about it, perhaps even more than, the descendants you have that are alive right now. So,
yeah, you are absolutely right. I paused my mic because I don't know if my mic's picking up my dog, who thinks that little squeaky toy she's got is just the jam back there. But
good. I was worried it was my dog.
No, it's definitely mine. She's never brought that toy into the office until today, but that's all right. I'm pretty good at editing, so I'll take care of her. But you are absolutely right, and I think it's really cool. Let's dive into a little bit of your beginning. What actually when did you first begin to believe that your voice needed to be smaller? Because I've never had somebody on there, say that. A lot of people, it's the exact opposite. They feel that they don't have a voice that matters, or a voice that is able to be shared. You're the exact opposite.
Well, early on in my life, I had parents who were very authoritarian, and they were also alcoholics. Okay. And so I think a lot of people out there know what that's like. You live on edge all the time, worrying, are you going to say the wrong thing? And there's a switch in the house that if someone flips, things get violent. And so you learn to be very careful. And I have a sister who was more careful than I was because I got into more trouble. And my mother always told me I was sassy. And outside of the home, maybe I had a little more leverage, but being a girl, there were certain things that were acceptable and certain things that were not for girls. Like boys would, they might ask me privately, like how to do something or what's the answer to this, but they're never going to do it in public, where the boys were going to be seen asking a girl, a question, especially about math or science. So early on, my third grade teacher said, Amy, I think you're going to be a writer. And in high school, I won a big essay contest, and I got to spend the summer traveling around. And my parents told me, my father told me that I would never be anything more than average. And he didn't mean that to be mean, but I think he was he was an alcoholic. His mother was an alcoholic, and his life was so hard growing up that to be average to him, like, why wouldn't that be enough? And it took me a long time to understand that that's what he meant. But, those are lots of reasons to be quiet. But outside of at school, I realized, I'm kind of a nerd. In fact, I am a nerd among nerds because there are certain things that I realized I had a certain level of brightness about. Mm-hmm. Not all the subjects, but there were certain things that, like, I realized, I'm okay. I won this contest and I was traveling with all these smart kids. And I thought, I'm going to just be this little nothing compared to them. And I was with them and like, hey, I'm even nerdier than they are. So, and I kind of relished that, like the academic things that I really was interested in. Like I would memorize poems because I wanted to. And I thought it was cool to know stuff, it's like, it made me feel better. It gave me ownership. And that's something that education, be it self-education or formal education, it really gives you ownership over this information. And, it doesn't always make you wise just to know things, but then you begin to be more abstract. So I always had this tension in me between be quiet and don't cause problems, and be helpful to everyone else. Like even, tiptoe around while you're doing it. So of course I went into nursing because, I was a girl and that's what everybody told me I should do. I should go into nursing because I liked science. And I spent a long time in nursing, and I think I made a difference. Well, I know I did, because one of the things I did is I started a program for people who were paralyzed or could be quadriplegic, paraplegic. And you can imagine I worked with a lot of veterans, also people with very advanced rheumatic arthritis that were nearly paralyzed. And I had a program where those people could be independent at home. I worked for a nonprofit, and the nonprofit said, we're not making any money off this program you started. And I was like, well, what about our Christian mission? And they were saying, well, you're not making any money. We're going to close the program down. So at that point, my heart was broken for nursing. I was not going to stay and watch those people go into nursing homes. And I remember driving home crying. If I had windshield wipers for my eyeballs, it probably would have been safer. I was just bawling all the way home. I don't even know how I got home safely. And my husband, and I'm going to mention it's my third husband, says to me, what's going on? And I told him, and he said, what are you going to do? And without any thought, just out of my sorrow, out of my tears, I said, I'm going to go back to school and study literature and writing. And he said, okay, then that's what you should do. So I didn't plan to say that. I just came out. And I was too stupid to know that I shouldn't apply to Bennington, because Bennington is one of the top writing programs. I just got a U.S. News and World Report and said, they said these are good schools, I'll apply there. And I somehow got in. They had 3 spots. They only had 3 spots in narrative nonfiction. And I think I was number 5, but 2 people, couldn't make it. And I made it into Bennington. And it was a great experience. I laughed, I cried, I threw up. It was really, but, really hard, wonderful experience. And I left with, credentials I could teach. And I had been publishing all the way through school. And I had a book contract. And that was for Every Natural Fact. So I've loved narrative nonfiction since then. And since then, I've been writing narrative nonfiction and helping other people tell their stories, because I really believe that when we make meaning from our lives become richer, and we nudge the world in a better direction.
Yeah, you said it perfect, because that is 100% true. There had to be some nerves, though, when you leave a established career like nursing and then transition into a career into writing. What was going through your mind as that process? Because it's not an easy transition. No,
it's it can be humiliating, being a writer, because you're rejected left and right. But I was so convinced that I had something to say worth saying. And then when I started teaching writing, I thought, I am working with people who have something to say, who think that nobody cares, and what they have to say is so important. I went to get an MFA probably because I didn't have enough self-confidence and I needed to be credentialed. But you don't have to have an MFA, but you do have to care about words and messages, and we should learn. I've created some ways of teaching. I teach a writing engine. How do you keep your writing engine going? And those things are really important. And then I have a method, I call it the jump method, which is, how do you know when you should be exploring on the page and not worrying about structure, and what are the times you do that, and what are the times that you just move through what you're supposed to write, and when should you edit? And I'm sure for most people, I know one writer who, he writes a page, he turns it over, and then he hands it off to his publisher. I would know one writer like that. All the rest of us, we write our draft, we make it messy, and then we do a macro. Do I have the structure right? Do I have this? Lots of developmental pushing and moving things around before we ever get into the proofreading or editing or making the sentences as beautiful. And in the end, what we want is to be as generous as we can to our readers, to really give them something of value. And most of us, anybody can do that. It's not easy, but just about anybody, if that's what they want to do, it's possible to do it. It's possible to write something that matters to something else. You write something and it becomes alive on the page, and it can be 200 years after you're gone, and somebody can pick it up and have a feeling and an experience with those words you leave behind. Boy, it is not a waste of time to write your story. It's really important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've published 3 books, and 2 out of the 3 are all nonfiction. One being, about myself as far as what I dealt with through the military, and then I wrote a fiction book with the purpose to get across to the readers what depression and PTSD looks like. If you had to have something physical to see and relate, so that people can stop saying, Why don't you just get over it, let it go, stop pouting about it, those types of things, because they can't see what's going on inside that person's head. So I wrote a book called When Demons Follow You Home, and I took the symptoms of PTSD and how I felt when I was going through it, and I turned it into a physical demon that was attacking, some veterans, some homeless veterans. And so that was my first fiction book. And I'm going to tell you, there is a huge difference between writing nonfiction and fiction. I struggled with that fiction book because I didn't know the story. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I knew the beginning and I knew the end. I didn't know the back roads that it was going to take me to get to there.
Mm-hmm.
When you have young authors that come to you and they say, hey, I got this idea or I got this project, where do you usually find that they're at? Because I think a lot of people, when they walk through that door, they think they're further down that road than they really are.
Or vice versa, really. I think that, my experience being educated at Bennington was more of they put you in a room and everybody tells you what's wrong with you, and you somehow survive that, which is helpful for, the life of an author. You have to take a lot of criticism. But yeah. I find that when people come to work with me at a conference or workshop, or I teach online, they often have two issues. They think that when they write their first draft, that it's wonderful because it was so hard to write that first draft. And, it's not ready. And the thing is, they can't see that it's not ready. And a lot of times they can't see what's special about their voice and their phrasing. And if they've been authentic, that manuscript that's not ready is probably full of gems. And they're not necessarily the best at seeing what's beautiful, what's awesome. And it's usually that the things that's bad about early manuscripts with younger writers is they want to fix everything. They want to have, I'm going to use this. My students once told me this. I had been giving this big lecture about how you want to be authentic and true, and truth is complex.
This episode is brought to you by Barracks Media, where your online presence becomes a real asset. Barracks Media builds professional websites for podcasters, creators, authors, and small businesses who are ready to be taken seriously. Not templates, not cookie-cutter pages, real platforms built to grow with you. Whether you're launching a podcast, promoting a book, or building a brand, your website should work as hard as you do. We design sites that convert listeners into followers and followers into clients. Visit barracksmedia.com and turn your idea into a home on the web.
And I was going on and on and on with pedagogy and stories. And finally, a student raised her hand and she said, Amy, are you saying you're sick of our hunky-dory endings? And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe that's it. That, the transcendent things that happened on the page aren't often big. You haven't figured out all the answers. You don't know the exact path. You don't, but it is the small realizations. And in fact, I've been so impressed with my students that I also have a small press. It's called Jack Walker Press. And I will periodically with my students, I'll put out calls for submissions, and I put them out to my students and to other people. And the first one I did was called Corners, Voices on Change. And it was about people having what at one points in their life that usually against their will, something happened and they had to make a change. And I had a fellow, and his name is Ken Williams, and he was a Vietnam vet, and he came with a story called Cherry. And now I have never been to war, but I could just feel this authenticity in the story. He was telling me what it felt like to be thrown onto a helicopter, to be flown into a battle. And I could feel it. I could feel the helicopter vibrating. Some of it was just beautiful. But then he ended with some cliches, and he didn't really know how to end it. And I opened this up before I have the book here, and I'm just going to read this where he ended up. And this is the ending we published. In this story, he had somebody who was a cherry with him who said, I'm going to shoot myself. I have to get out of here. And eventually he did. This friend of his shot himself in the leg. And he said, the only thing I knew is that neither I nor anyone else could judge him. We all paid a price. We all carried a burden. Some of us fulfilled our duty, but honor became elusive in that moral quagmire. We were all too young. The previous day was my 19th birthday. On both sides, boys killed boys. And if we didn't die, we would just have to live with that.
Yeah. Wow. It is, he is 100% correct, because, I've said this in several of my other podcasts. So many times people think that that everybody over there fighting these wars is fighting for their country. And that may be the thought process that they have when they go over there. But when the bullets start flying on both sides, I think the people are just fighting to go home. And that is powerful, because what he said is very true.
Right. So he was able to, he didn't wrap anything up like, well, now I figured out the meaning of war and now life is great.
Yep.
That is not truthful. So anyway, he was able to really, I was showing him where all this authenticity in his voice was so powerful. And then he was able to take that to the whole arc of his story. And after he wrote this personal essay called Cherry that was published in Corners, Voices on Change, he went on to write a book. And right after he got his book published, he passed away. And I'm just saying that because, wow, write your stories, because we don't know it. I mean, I just read you a few sentences, and I always feel the power in his voice, and he's gone. So that thing we had talked about, 200 years from now, if somebody picks it up, that power will still be there.
Yeah, and it resonated with me for obvious reasons, but you are correct. In his voice, you can feel the authenticity, and you don't have to have been in combat or anything to understand where his emotions are and the thought process that he's thinking through. So yeah, he did an amazing job with the way him and the team that helped him put it together. The way y'all ended it was very good.
Yeah, so I love to work with writers. I have another thing. A lot of women will come to me with letters from maybe it's a great grandmother or a great aunt. We had a time in our country when women could be put away into asylums. Mm-hmm. Your husband got sick of you. Or whatever, you could just end up in an asylum. All you needed is your husband and one doctor to say, hey, she should go. And they went. And I've had all these women come to me with these letters going, what do I do with this? And I've had quite a few of them publish either a book or essay forms about, trying to give some dignity and identity back to these women. So we all have things we've been through, things that are in our past, in our families, and it matters. And I was so caught up in my students for a while that I went, I think I went 7 years without publishing a book. So recently, my mother passed away, and then, I would have never said my parents were alcoholics, like I told you, but now they're gone, and everybody who knows them knows they were alcoholics. So, they did a lot of wonderful things and a lot of difficult things. And I decided I was going to take that same journey of authenticity that I was looking for in every natural fact, where I went to nature, where I tried to silence the commercial aspect of life that tells you who you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to look, for women, for what you're valued. If you're just, help everybody and be quiet. I mean, that's kind of what I thought that was what a good woman was supposed to do. I mean, I knew it wasn't, but I was so pressured to be that thing that now that I'm older and I have my voice, I was finally willing to go back and look at my life. I told you, third husband. Now, I've been married over 30 years, but I had I had difficult marriages. There were abuse. I was on welfare. I had to work full time and put myself through nursing school. And I started out as a licensed practical nurse because you could do that in a year. But that year I had to be on welfare to get through it. And I used to have a lot of shame over that. And now I don't. I think it's because I'm older. I'm like, hey, I did pretty well. I was left alone and I had a child and I made it through. I also had, my mother hid the truth of my paternity from me. In fact, I don't think she knew who my father was. And I spent time unraveling. I had more secrets, lies, and assumptions in my life, things that I just pushed aside my whole life.
This episode is brought to you by Barracks Media, where your online presence becomes a real asset. Barracks Media builds professional websites for podcasters, creators, authors, and small businesses who are ready to be taken seriously. Not templates, not cookie-cutter pages, real platforms built to grow with you. Whether you're launching a podcast, promoting a book, or building a brand, your website should work as hard as you do. We design sites that convert listeners into followers and followers into clients. Visit barracksmedia.com and turn your idea into a home on the web.
Yeah.
And so my newest book, which should be out later this year, is called The Alchemy of Sass. And it's about this trying to unravel these secrets, lies, and assumptions that underpin my identity. Yeah. And of course, there's still some nature in there because I look to nature for solace and grounding and to quiet my busy monkey mind. I'm not one of those people who can sit in tailor position and meditate. I just get out in nature, and that's where my meditation comes from. That's what I feel like. If I look at a lake, it soaks up all my errant thoughts, and I can be present. And so I went to that last summer. I went to our cottage in Arkansas all by myself. Left my husband behind and said, I just need some time alone.
Yeah.
And I was not happy with him. He had just retired. And, it's like all the problems that you push away your whole marriage are all of a sudden there in your face. And I had all these things I was burying. And writing the book would have been helpful even if I was never to publish it. But I wrote it for an audience so that, I think it's a kind of page turning because you wonder, oh my goodness, who is her father? What happened? And how is she going to get herself out of this mess? I spent 3 years in Alaska. And I was abducted. I had 2 men try to abduct me from a bar when I was a kid.
Wow.
And so, it was, I like a lot of people, when you write it all down, it's like, oh my God. But when you write a memoir, it's not the story of my whole life, but I wrote the story of my identity going through. And I didn't realize, my whole life it's been this sassiness, like this back and forth about I'm supposed to just be quiet and not cause trouble, but I've got something to say. And so it was very, it was great for me. And I think for other women, I have noticed that younger women will often tell me, oh, that is your generation. Like we don't have that anymore. I think I'll just be kind. I think that's BS. They do too have it, because when I'm in a room now and I see people silencing younger women, I'm the one to say something. So
yeah, I will be honest. I am the same way. I'm not a shy person when it comes to saying what's on my mind. So I can absolutely relate to what you're saying, and I can also relate to what you're saying about nature. You know, I used to do a lot of squirrel hunting, and I don't even know why I call it that, because what it really consisted of 98% of the time was me walking through the woods and finding a good tree to sit under and just sitting there and relaxing, you know, and I don't ever even shoot at a squirrel. I just get back up and walk back, you know, when I've kind of oosawed and been able to relax, and it is very therapeutic. So I get the nature sense behind it as well. You know, I was sitting here laughing, and one of the reasons is because I had a guest on this particular podcast. She said something that I still laugh, and she decided that she had a story to tell, and that's where her first book started. It was about her life, and she decided the best way to do it was she downloaded all of her posts from Facebook. And
I heard about the woman who went to Iceland. I listened to that.
Yes,
She was awesome. Yeah.
yes, and listening to you talk about, you know, the younger women and how they would put their stories out there, it really resonated because she did have a story. I really would have liked to have been the editor's face when you handed him all those Facebook posts, but she did have a story, and you know, I think that by doing that, she found her voice, like what you were saying.
Yes. Well, there's another woman. I think her pen name is E.C. Stilson, and she wrote a book. When I was listening to your podcast, I thought of her, and she has been living with terminal cancer for the last 12 years, and she was given 2 years to live. And she was posting about this all the time, you know, and she's been somehow, you know, she's had terrible treatments all the way through, but she took her posts and, you know, figured out those were the basics of her book. And, you know, for many of us, our journals are the raw materials.
Yeah.
So I can see where Facebook could serve that process. It's not the book. It's the raw materials that you turn into a book. Yeah,
you are absolutely right. Some of the soldiers that I've seen write books, you know, come from great journaling, you know, just like what you said. A lot of them was writing stuff down while we were over there. And I remember thinking to myself, man, why are you writing all this stuff down? You know? And I wish I had journaled when I was over there, because the detail that they have compared to what I have from memory is amazing.
Yes, but I think our minds are amazing. You know, when I was writing this memoir, because, you know, it takes many drafts to get it right. And I would find that when I would go back to another draft, almost every draft, a few more details would come to me. And the other thing I learned on this last book, and my process seems to be different for every book, is I don't want to stop and edit because I will just be in a quagmire all the time. But I learned what I would do is if I wrote in the morning, first thing in the morning, my mind would work on that. Like, oh, I should mention this, or somewhere in the day I'd have another detail. And then all I would do that night is go back and add those few things that I had thought of. Then the next day, move on to the next thing, move on. By the time I figured out what the structure of my book is, well, then I write and I have a word count, and I'm going to accomplish that every day. And then really, it doesn't take me a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years to write a book anymore. If I have done a lot my pre-writing, and then I figured out what I'm writing about, and I have a structure, then I can write the book really in 5-6 months. I can write. Well, the last book was 110,000, but then I had to. I think, in fact, it's with a publisher right now, and I'm just waiting. I think they're going to tell me, can you make it a little shorter? Because I'm at 90,000. But we go through it a lot. But it's amazing the details that will come back to you.
Yeah.
Maybe not at the first pass, but making all those passes through, it's amazing, the details. People say, "How do you remember that?" And I say, "I don't know." It's magic.
Yeah, you are right. The mind is one of those things that is another unexplored frontier. Just like the ocean, we don't know everything about it, and the things that we learn every few years is truly amazing.
Right.
You were talking earlier about the different types of writings, right? When I say that, I mean like between journaling and writing articles or writing for magazines. What do you find are? I used to write for a veteran magazine. It's no longer being published, but I truly enjoyed it, and it is a different type of writing. What do you consider some of the bigger differences between somebody that's writing a book versus writing a story that they're telling through a magazine article?
Well, I really think you learn a lot from every genre. So I love, because a book is a big deal, and really you're going to come, if you can write one a year, boy, that's really awesome. And for most of us, it takes a little longer. So it's a way to sustain your writing. And I think if what's going on in your writing life, if I say, well, 2 years ago, this book came out and this next one will be out like sometimes later next year. But I have all these things I do in between. Like right now I have I have 2 book reviews that I'm writing for magazines that I'll write over the next few weeks. And it gives me a feeling of satisfaction, because really I read the book and then I spend one day writing it, and then the next day, probably 3/4 of the day, rewriting it. And then I leave it sit. And then, the next day, hopefully it's only another hour. But that is such a short timeline compared to writing something like a book. And then I get to see it in publication, and my neighbors say, "Oh, I saw the review in the Sierra Club about this." And I write a column for them. So when I see people, they'll say, "Oh, what's the next book you're reading for the Sierra Club?" And I find it fun. And then when I write other articles, I don't have to, people don't have to go out and buy my book or, find the article and read it. And also I learned something, and it's good for my career, and it feels good. But I do have a rule as I'm older now, and the Sierra Club is okay with this, that if I don't like a book, I just stop. I'm not going to write a bad review.
Yeah. Because
why spend my time tearing down an author? I won't do it. I mean, I might not tell you. It doesn't mean I'm going to lie. I might say, "Oh, there was this or that in the book I didn't like." But I really feel like I should be a champion for literature. So if I don't like it, I just put it aside. And the other thing is, I could be wrong. I don't know about you, but I have already read a book and thought, "Oh, I don't like that." And then 5 years later, I looked at it again and I thought, "What was I thinking? That's amazing. That book is awesome." Yeah. So I do write a lot of reviews, and I write a lot of craft articles. And I mean, I've written thousands of articles about writing, and lots of reviews and lots of essays. I've written essays about deer hunting and being a Packers fan and cooking and just about every aspect of my life. Usually I write narrative nonfiction. I have written some children's books, and I'm going to be a grandma, so I bet there's some more children's books coming.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm very excited to have my sassy voice. And if I can create something that is of value for someone else, my nursing career was very meaningful. I felt like I did things that made a difference for other people. And I feel the same way about my writing career.
That's awesome. Well, Miss Amy, can you tell everybody where is it that they can follow you and learn more about your books and maybe even see your reviews and everything else that you got going on?
Well, good. Well, I hope what they'll do is go to amyloujenkins.com. And I have something very exciting. My publisher said, since I have a new memoir coming out, they're allowing me to give away an ebook of every natural fact. So if you go to amyloujenkins.com, you'll see a link there. When you download it, you will join my Lit Friends list, and I'll, can tell you all about the things that I can help people do as they think about writing. We have everything from small, I call them studio sessions, where you come in, learn something, practice, write with us, just small studio sessions. They're inexpensive, to a full year program about mastering the art of narrative nonfiction. So there's lots of ways to interact. The other thing is we every so often put out an anthology, and right now we have a call for essays, personal essays about aging. And that doesn't mean getting old. That means it could be I just turned 26 and I'm smarter than when I was 22, or what it means when you realize that people look at you and go, "Oh, I'm not young anymore." Like what age is that? What does that happen? So it doesn't have to mean aging like you're moving into the old folks home. Anything that has to do with getting older. I had somebody submit one about heading off to college. So they're trying to rewrite it. We'll see if it makes it into the book. But so your people listening to this podcast could submit to that. And when you join Lit Friends, you're going to get information about how to submit to our projects, how to learn to write, and you'll hear about what's going on in my writing life too.
All right. Yeah. I want all of you guys that are listening to this, I get asked all the time about, hey, how do I write a book? Or do you think my story's worth writing? And that's really what this show's about. And Miss Amy's now giving you guys another lifeline out there that you can reach out and learn. If you do reach out and you purchase her book or you get the ebook that she's talking about, don't y'all be lazy. Y'all need to leave reviews. If you read, you leave a review, and it helps all the authors out there. And when you finally write your book, you're going to want that same thing. You're going to want that feedback, and you're going to want the algorithms fed that the world has came to nowadays. And I ask that you guys help out and do the same thing. So, Ms. Amy, I thank you very much for coming on the show. You left us with a bunch of nuggets of gold for all the young authors out there that got stories and are looking to tell them and share them. So I appreciate you very much.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You guys take care. Be safe out there, and we will catch y'all next time.
You've been listening to Authors After Action, a podcast from the Barracks Media Network. Thanks to our guest for sharing their story, and thank you for listening. You can explore more conversations like this across the Barracks Media Network. We'll see you next time.